It's the year 2025. The first openly authoritarian president of the United States has just taken office. I feel like we've all forgotten that we literally live in like a sci-fi dystopia, but it's not a cool sci-fi dystopia. We have billionaires taking like vacations to the friggin' stratosphere in their own personal rocket, and we have supercomputers in our pockets, but we also have like Uber Eats, which is weirdly dystopian when you think of it. Like, what do you mean you're gonna artificially increase all the prices and have like a 30 cajillion dollar delivery fee on top of everything else already? Then my McDouble and my Diet Coke are like $1 million and I don't even fucking want them anymore. I spend a lot of time thinking about how the world got this way. How we started living in this Netflix original version of Cyberpunk 2077. What systemic structural forces have pushed the United States and the world at large down this path? There are a bunch. Racism, corruption, even capitalism itself. But one I think is important and extremely under-discussed is media manipulation. Everyone knows that there's something wrong with the way our media works now, but it's just hard to put your finger on exactly what's going on. So to figure out exactly what the problem is, I read this book called Network Propaganda, which is like the main source for this video, among others. The researchers who wrote the book basically mapped out the entire US media ecosystem and how information flows through it. And what they found is so interesting. Obviously, I'll get like way deeper into this, but basically they found that the right has created this parallel media apparatus that's designed to spread propaganda from the top down. The goal of the whole thing being to manipulate segments of the population into voting for politicians that align with the interests of rich conservatives. This has led to the rise of Trumpism, the stripping of civil rights, and the general like hyper-capitalist dystopia vibe we've got going on right now. You're definitely either reacting to this information in one of two ways. You're either shocked by how much it sounds like a literal fucking conspiracy theory, or you're literally just not surprised at all, which is so real, because me neither. I am surprised, but at the end of the day, this all makes so much sense when you put it together. So let's walk through how this media apparatus actually works. This whole thing kind of started in 1971 when this guy named Lewis Powell, who was at the time a corporate lawyer but in the future became a Supreme Court justice, writes this memo called Attack on the American Free Enterprise System. More like attack on my tiny penis, like literally what? The memo's main goals were to tell conservative business leaders to start sinking as much money as they possibly can into think tanks. Think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, who are literally the architects behind Project 2025. It also instructed them to engage in more pro-capitalist messaging and to start taking a more active pro-business role in politics, which is exactly what everybody needed. So I'm not actually sure how much most people know what a think tank even is, so I'm just going to define it simply for everyone, so we're all on the same page here. A think tank's basically the research and development lab of politics. They do policy research, so that's like boring shit like the tax code, even to crazy shit like Project 2025, that's technically policy. They develop talking points and rhetoric, so that's like when every member of the Republican Party or every Democrat are all saying the same thing, a lot of the time, they've probably been briefed by some think tank. And they just generally try to provide material for politicians in the media. Chat, something tells me Powell might have had some kind of corporate interest. I don't know though, I can't tell. Honestly, I have no idea. But I did forget to mention, and it is in my script like earlier, I genuinely actually like forgot to mention, during his time as a corporate lawyer, he represented the tobacco industry. So there we go, point brought back up. We all know now, so yeah, he liked money. Bro loved money. He liked money. Money, 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 money. And to make more of that money, he wanted American politics to shift further to the right. Left. That's the left, but that's okay. It is now 1980, and this alarm clock is about to be born. But more importantly, Ronald Reagan has just won the election in a landslide. Everyone loves the guy. He's great. He's not senile at all. I don't think he's senile at the beginning. He gets senile towards the end though. But anyways, you know Reagan, you know him. That guy. He's just a scamp. He loves his tax cuts and his deregulation. He wants to cut all the taxes for all the rich people, but he says it's for everybody. And he wants to just gut all the regulations that stop businesses from doing, like, you know, whatever they want. A key casualty of Reagan's reign over the United States is something called the Fairness Doctrine. I don't know why the Fairness Doctrine doesn't get brought up more. Like, it's so forgotten about, but it's such a good law. It basically states that anyone who holds a broadcast license, so anyone who broadcasts radio and TV, has to bring up issues that are actually important to, like, you know, the American people, and they have to represent all the different viewpoints on said issues in, like, a normal, fair, good faith way. Like, it's just a way to keep the news fairer, and that's what it was. And Reagan killed it. He axed it. He fucking gutted it, napalmed it, kaput it, gone, garbage, burnt, gone. We need the Fairness Doctrine 2025, because the Fairness Doctrine is literally just the most reasonable thing ever. I think, like, Reagan is insane for getting rid of that. Like, that just tells me you're acting in bad faith. That's all that tells me. That's just like, okay, you're evil. You got rid of, like, a really reasonable, normal thing that, like, normal people benefit from. Okay, like, not cool of you, but whatever. Like, I guess it's gone now. But we could bring it back if we had, like, you know, a functional government and stuff like that. And next time we do, maybe we can bring it back, but like a more updated version that has, like, algorithms and social media in mind and can make sure that they're not promoting, like, you know, crap. Something like the Fairness Doctrine is basically required for a functioning democracy, or at least like a well-funded public news broadcaster that's gonna, like, kind of keep the whole landscape, like, under wraps. Because here in Canada we have the CBC, which is like the government-funded news, and it's like, it kind of keeps all of our other news from going too far in any direction. Same thing with the BBC in England. Like, it just seems like a good idea. But nope, can't have shit in America, so it's gone. Don't mind me and my iPad. Just me and my iPad. So for us to actually understand the effects that the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine had on the media, which are, like, huge, we need to understand what the media ecosystem was like in 1987 at the time of the repeal. That's also kind of when Reagan was going a little bit senile, but that's fine. So at the time, the mainstream media wasn't something that your, like, conspiracy-addled grandpa yelled at you about. It was a relatively broad network of all sorts of different outlets: TV, magazines, radio. There were big corporate ones and there were little local ones. Most of them were all relatively neutral, but there were some with a little bit of a conservative bias and some with a little bit of a liberal bias, and, like, some that were completely neutral, and, like, you know, there were all kinds. But there were some basic standards. The outlets in this ecosystem would cite each other as sources and fact-check each other. They had editors who enforced editorial standards, like, don't print this fucking garbage. If one of the publications got something blatantly wrong, a lot of the time they would issue, like, a retraction and a correction, which is crazy by 2025 standards, because I don't remember nobody ever doing that. Obviously, it was never perfect. There's never been, like, a golden age of the media. There's always been issues. There's always been bias. There's always been political weirdness around it. By iPad. But in that media environment, there was at least a shared baseline reality. People wouldn't argue about, like, the facts of something or whether or not it was real, but they'd argue about, like, what to do about it instead. It was just a healthier body politique. So to sum up, before the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine, the media ecosystem was, like, meh. It was whatever. It was fine. It was satisfactory. It got the job done. It created a shared baseline reality that people could follow and use to cooperate with each other. It was like the bare minimum. But as you know, dear viewer, it doesn't work like that anymore. The media is crazy. It's, like, so fragmented. It's all over the place. It's really hard to make sense of. And that all started after the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine in 1987. In the late 80s and the 90s, there was a talk radio boom. But not just any talk radio. These weren't the old-fashioned stations of yesteryear that did, like, basic journalism or any of that liberal bullshit. No. These were explicitly conservative talk radio stations cropping up all across the country. The most famous talk radio host to come out of this period, you might know him, Rush Limbaugh. Fun fact about Rush, he had a book written about him called Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot and Other Observations, where the guy who wrote the book basically just pointed out how he lies about everything to advance his political agenda, which, like, yeah, blood. And these political commentators on talk radio weren't just cropping up for the love of the game. They weren't just here to destroy the libs with facts and logic, at least not for fun anyways. They were being bankrolled. There were a lot of seedy people involved, including think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, who will make a million appearances in this video. It's 1996. The corporate donors have gotten bigger, the conservative media apparatus has grown larger, and the money and attention is pouring in. If you thought these ghouls were gonna stop at talk radio, Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes joined together to launch the explicitly conservative news network that you might know as Fox News.
You're watching Fox News!
Fun fact about Roger Ailes, he had to leave Fox in 2016 after sexual assault allegations. Just covering my ass here. He was also a media spin doctor for Richard Nixon, the most disgraced pre-Trump president. And obviously, like, Rupert Murdoch is kind of his own deal. I don't even need to get into him. There's too much. There's a whole other video there. So Fox News isn't run by think tanks, but like, it might as well be. They provide them with rhetorical strategies, with lines to lie to people with. They make up stories for them. They do all sorts of stuff and then just give it right to Fox News all the time. And like, we've all heard the idea that Fox News is propaganda. I mean, at least I hope we have. But like, how is it exactly? Well, there are a few important strategies that the network uses to manipulate your tiny little mushy little brain. First, they talk about conservatives as if they're like these warriors for truth, and like everyone else is just these awful elitist scumbags who are working for the man. This is called victim hero framing, and basically the whole point of it is that they want you to distrust all the media outside of the conservative ecosystem, so they're planting this idea in your head that everyone else is lying to you and they're the only people they can trust. It's very manipulative. In the same vein, whenever they're fact-checked by like mainstream media, which is again a completely different ecosystem from the right, they frame the corrections as if they're liberal media bias and then use it to reinforce their viewers' perception that the liberal media is trying to persecute them because they're so evil and blah, 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 blah. 3, I don't know if I did the number for the last one, but they are always running a friggin' scandal. Scandal starts, scandal runs its course, everyone gets exhausted of it, even if it's not even real, which I'll get to later. When everybody becomes exhausted of the scandal, they start a new scandal, and it's to keep the viewer kind of hooked in like an emotional outrage loop. And they love repetition. They run the same points across all their shows. You'll see the same thing on the morning show as on the 5, as on the evening news, as on blah, 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 blah. It's the same shit in every fucking shithole. It's the same points across all their shows. Same deal all the time, all day, to just brute force jam their narrative like into your skull. So there's some like real basic psychology shit going on around here. These conservatives are not smart. They don't need to know very complex things about psychology to be able to exploit people. It's actually pretty easy to manipulate everybody. Who would have thought? Neuroscience research finds that when injustice is perceived against the in-group, which in this case is conservatives, it activates the reward and habit regions in the brain, which means that networks like Fox News can exploit this and create a rewarding habit out of being outraged at whatever people are saying about your little conservative buddies. They also exploit something called the mode of attribution asymmetry, which is just fancy jargon for the idea that like our side is acting in good faith and we're just angels and we're always doing the right thing, and our side only wants the best for everyone, and the other side is evil and crazy and they just want to destroy everything. It's dumb, but they play into that. They exploit that psychological mechanism to, again, push their agenda and indoctrinate the viewer into their media bubble. So here's a little psychology lesson for all of you guys. Basically, the back of your brain, it's called your hindbrain, which I know is like super creative, is the oldest part, and the front is the newest part. Basically, the back part is where all of your like evolutionary, ancient, ancestral urges come from. This is from like way back in the day when you're like hunting for shit and like fighting beasts and like looking for food and cave to sleep in and whatever. It's old, and it's not wired to be critical. It's wired for survival and instincts and like animal, like raw, give me some meat, like blah. You know when you go to the fridge at like 2 a.m. looking for like a snack or whatever, and like it's a big snack? That's not your forebrain where your executive function lives. This is where all your self-control is. Your midnight snack is coming from back here. Fox News is exploiting the same part of your brain that makes you go to the fridge and have a snack at 2 in the morning when you probably should not. They create political tribalism by exploiting the part of your brain that evolved to exist in an actual tribe. It can't get any simpler than that. So I'm gonna be like so for real with you guys right now, like real talk. This will sound opinionated to some people, but it is not opinion. In the book Network Propaganda, the researchers state that they explicitly set out not expecting to find a partisan explanation for the problems with the media ecosystem that we have today. They did not want it to lean left or right. They thought that there was going to be equal amounts of like propaganda on the left as there were on the right to some extent. But that's not what they found. When you contrast the mainstream media versus the right-wing media, you see that they're just not the same at all. They call it asymmetrical in the book. In the mainstream media, which I described already earlier, it's decentralized. All these different outlets are getting information from each other, and they're fact-checking each other, and they're correcting each other, and they have basic journalistic integrity and all this stuff. The right-wing media ecosystem is top-down. An idea starts in a think tank or on Fox News, and then it works its way down through the ecosystem and gets to all the talk radio people and the influencers and all that. It goes from the top in the think tank to Fox News, and then Fox News spreads it all around like a dandelion flinging its friggin' seeds everywhere. I don't know, is that how dandelions work? But it's like, it spews everywhere. And then everyone picks up the same talking points. And that's why you might notice that conservatives always all follow the same talking points in their media. That is not a coincidence. And again, this is where I might sound opinionated, but it's not opinion. They measured the entire media ecosystem, like they mapped out the entire thing. They're scientific researchers. You can read the book yourself. I find the audiobook is easier. But what that tells me is that the whole idea of both sides being bad is dumb as shit. One side of the media is getting their information from all kinds of different sources. Bad ones, good ones, hot air balloon ones, like it literally all over the place. There are bad outlets in the mainstream media that report shit. There are good ones in the mainstream media that report factual, good, as objective as humans can be. They do a good job, like Reuters, for example. The conservative media ecosystem is just not the same. At the center of the conservative media ecosystem, there's Fox News in the middle, and it all branches out from Fox. In the mainstream media, the same thing is not true. There's no center of the mainstream media that everything revolves around. It's just not the way it's set up. Both sides, as like an argument for why you can take whatever stance you want on political issues, simply does not exist in the real world. Like, there is no both sides. The liberal media does not exist. It's the early 2010s. The internet is ascendant, and everyone is dressed like shit. Now, a lot of people think that the rise of the internet and algorithms in the 2010s is what led to the rise of the right, which it's putting the blame in the wrong place. It's not the poor internet's fault. I love the internet. I'm the biggest internet fan ever. I'm literally on the internet right now. The internet didn't cause the rise of the right. The right co-opted the internet. In the mid-2010s or so, when all the platforms were getting beefier and beefier algorithms, most of them, if not all of them, tended to optimize for the most outrageous content possible to keep the viewer hooked on the site for as long as they possibly can, because the longer that eyeballs are on the screen, the more delicious coin they can make from those sexy advertising dollars. Ooh. And it just so happened that conservatives decided to take advantage of this. But it wasn't out of the blue, because over the years they had already building up an outrage-based media machine with Fox News and the talk radio network. And just like with talk radio, they bought and paid for a whole nightmare blunt rotations worth of influencers, such as Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, and our favorite, Benny Johnson. Then, closer to the end of the 2010s, when everyone was getting super duper hyper online and it was really good for everyone's mental health, these things called aggregator accounts started to pop up as the political climate grew more extreme. Aggregator accounts are accounts like Libs of TikTok, which is my favorite one. Fun fact about Libs of TikTok, the lady behind it, whose name is something like Chaya Raichek, Kaya Chucha, Huda Haya Haichak, Haya Raichak. I'm just fucking saying shit at this point. But anyways, she was exposed by my favorite reporter, Taylor Lorenz, in 2021, which I think is so cool, because basically, using the account Libs of TikTok, she anonymously gained millions of followers, influence within Fox News itself, and within the Republican Party itself, all completely anonymously. She was literally a huge power broker, and she was completely anonymous, which is insane and should not happen. And that's why our girl Taylor walked in there and like did some tweet tracing shit and figured out that it was her. Huda Haida check. Anyways, aggregator accounts are very interesting because they play a very important role in the 2020s version of this whole right-wing media ecosystem. These accounts scour the internet and basically look for any kind of outrageous content they can find, and then they amplify it to their audience of millions and to Fox News itself, and sometimes these things even wind up getting covered on the actual news. So this is the part I think is the most interesting of the whole thing, and also the part that feels the most like some crazy movie. Like, it literally does not feel real, and that is the outrage cycle. The first stage is narrative seeding, which usually happens in one of two ways. The first way is what I was describing earlier, where an account like Libs of TikTok will basically scour the internet and go on like the darkest, deepest corners of like TikTok or whatever, and take some video that's like espousing some sort of semi-controversial left-wing view on some topic, and this video will have like 30 views. And then they'll just blow the whole thing up, post it on their account a million times, and frame it as if this is what the entire left thinks, and look at them, they're so crazy, blah, 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 blah. The second way one can seed a narrative is when a think tank basically just like cooks it up in their lab, and it's genetically engineered to piss everybody off. An example of this is the War on Christmas. The War on Christmas was cooked up in a think tank. If you are a real PragerU superfan, you will know the War on Christmas. It was basically the idea that the left hates Christmas and wants to make everybody say happy holidays, which is just so stupid to the point where it feels like it was made in a lab to piss everybody off, which it was. And then they just hand the point down directly to Fox News, and we get to stage 2. Stage 2 of the outrage cycle is circulation in right-wing spaces. So again, this is when it starts circulating around their media bubble. This is like after Libs of TikTok makes the post with the random leftist person saying some random leftist take and says this is what everyone who's not a conservative thinks, and then all the conservatives in their audience are like aghast and they're like, oh my god, how could they think this, they're such crazy meh 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 meh. They get emotionally escalated, they get all full of outrage, all full of fear, all full of anger, and then this is where it gets spicy. Fox News pays attention to what's going on right-wing Twitter. And if they, and I'm assuming their think tank, likes what they see enough, they will pick up a story and start doing wall-to-wall coverage on it. Stage 3 of the outrage cycle is the jump to the mainstream. This is after Fox News has picked up the story, and now it's being covered by all the mainstream media outlets who feel obligated to cover it, but they don't cover it honestly. When it was really a thing made up by a think tank or some post dug up from the depths of the internet, the mainstream media tends to cover it more as an actual controversy, which they don't do just because they're evil. They kind of just do it because it makes them more money off of like clicks and ad revenue, which is what at the end of the day this whole thing boils down to, is they just want attention. But after it gets covered in the mainstream media, this is when it makes the jump to your feed and to the regular internet that normal people use. And then you'll start seeing stuff about the War on Christmas, or which is an old example, or, for example, Sydney Sweeney's motherfucking jeans. So I feel like Sydney Sweeney and her little jeans are exactly the perfect example for me to spell out what this actually looks like. It sounds a little confusing and abstract when I just say it like a theory kind of way, you know what I mean? It's really you really grasp it when you see an example. I picked this one because it happened relatively recently, but it's politically low stakes, like it's not who gives a fuck. And it's relatively recent, so like I feel like most people are relatively familiar with it. And it was a big deal when it happened for whatever reason, despite the fact that nobody gives a fuck. But that's exactly what the outrage cycle is designed to do. Make you give a fuck about something that actually doesn't matter at all. So it started out with this ad that I'm going to put on screen. I'm going to show you. In our political climate right now, with, you know, the first sitting authoritarian president right now and everything, it is weird, and it does low-key give, like, eugenics. But at the end of the day, if there wasn't a whole controversy around it, and you just showed me or, like, any other regular person that ad, you probably wouldn't have thought anything about it. I know I wouldn't have thought anything about it. I would have just been like, oh, that's a lame ad. It's actually based on a Brooke Shields campaign she did for, I think, Calvin Klein back in the 80s when she was 15, by the way. I don't know why we were sexualizing 15-year-olds, but that's crazy. I'm not showing that one. But anyways, after the ad dropped, even online, you could see that nobody was talking about it. There was the odd video on TikTok, especially in, like, leftist spaces, that was criticizing it. But reporting by the New York Times shows that most of those videos had less than 500 views. That is, until our favorite aggregator account, Libs of TikTok and others, found these random videos in the corners of TikTok with less than 500 views, posted them on their feed with captions like, "This is what the left thinks about blonde white woman. The left wants to take away our blonde white woman. Rah!" And they acted as if this was the viewpoint of everyone who wasn't a conservative, when it was really the viewpoint of a very small niche community on TikTok who was low-key right. But that's besides the point. Then, obviously, these tweets generated huge amounts of engagement from crazed conservatives who were outraged by the left wants to steal your white woman. And then Fox News picked up the story because it was trending on their Twitter, and then they started to do wall-to-wall coverage. Like, I'm not even kidding. All day long, they were running Sydney Sweeney and her goddamn motherfucking jeans all day long. I don't know how you could watch that shit, let alone be outraged by it. Like, it's mind-numbing. Then, because of all this noise, look at these two headlines. One's from The Guardian, and one's from the Daily Wire, which, for those who don't know, is Ben Shapiro's publication. These outlets both framed it as a real controversy, and not as some stupid thing dug up from the depths of the internet. Obviously, we expect this from the Daily Wire, but not from The Guardian. The Guardian's just doing it in more neutral language. And then by this point, the whole thing was on everybody's feed, and all anyone could talk about, or at least what I saw, all anyone was talking about was Sydney Sweeney and her fucking jeans, and I didn't care. It was a nice time because I got to tune out, which was nice, because I knew I wasn't missing anything. But this whole thing originated from these niche posts with, like, no views, and the outcome was a national story with everyone involved. And the only reason it went away was just because everyone got so exhausted of arguing, no minds were changed, no progress was made, nobody got anything out of it except for the outlets making money and the conservatives getting to push their narrative and win a little culture war. This whole outrage cycle would be cute if it stopped at stupid, meaningless crap like Sydney Sweeney's jeans. But sadly, it does not. An example of the outrage cycle having real, meaningful, tangible effects on the real lives of regular people is the trans people in sports debate. It followed pretty much the exact same formula as the Sydney Sweeney thing. It started highly local, context-specific, with like one or two examples. Then it was wildly misinterpreted and reframed and spread everywhere, and in a lot of cases completely just helped by mainstream media outlets, until it finally made its way into law in some Republican states and the Canadian province of Alberta, which of course was fucking Alberta. The government of Alberta has basically put into place requirements where little girls who are signing up for their school's like volleyball team have to provide their birth certificates to prove their gender, which is fucking insane. And there are laws like that all across the United States as well. This is an example of right-wing actors ratcheting up hatred against a certain group, and using their media apparatus to strip away their right to a normal, peaceful life, which is all anybody wants at the end of the day. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And you can also definitely already see how all of these issues led to the rise of Trumpism. Trump is like the perfect storm for this media apparatus. Using Outrage, he was able to keep all the attention on him during the 2016 election, which got the word about his campaign out to people who didn't usually vote, and helped him win the election. I don't think I need to go into why this is all bad for democracy in, like, much depth, because, like, duh. All of this is built up because of economic incentive. This is rich people trying to become richer and more powerful. That's how it started anyways. And now it's snowballed into a self-reinforcing feedback loop where random controversies get spun up like friggin' Sydney Sweeney's jeans and nobody really even controls it. What we need to do is fix the incentive structure. We need to regulate the media and the internet. Something like the fairness doctrine, but updated for 2025 for algorithms and social media, like I said earlier. Obviously, this isn't going to happen while Baby Don is in office, but there will be a post-Trump era. I promise you he won't last forever. And about the whole regulation thing, I'm a huge fan of tech regulation, but right now a lot of bills are circulating around, like the Kids Online Safety Act, that are masquerading as cracking down on big tech. But what they're really doing is cracking down on free speech. I don't have much time to get into this, but I'll leave a video link in the description for those of you who are interested in that topic. All of this stuff with media manipulation and these incentive structures and this giant apparatus is just so complicated, and like, honestly, I have no idea how this will go over, but I do think that we're reaching a breaking point. But one of my goals on this channel is to not leave you wanting to, like, off yourself, so I just also want to add, what can we do in our, like, real lives that can help us live within this system without being crushed by it? Because obviously you're not going to fix America on your own. Obviously the most important thing, to me anyways, is emotional detachment. It's not in a cynical way, it's not saying don't care about the world, but it's to recognize that a lot of the stuff on your phone is just trying to make you emotional, trying to get you to share the content or spread the content or like the content so that it can get boosted by the algorithm. Don't fall for it. If something makes you feel really angry or really vindicated, pause and reflect and look at like the account that posted it and like the incentives behind like why would somebody be saying this. When you see a post that's like obviously propaganda, just don't interact with it. Don't leave a comment arguing with it. Don't interact with it, because interaction is good for it. And more like in real life, I also want to advocate for like truth hygiene. A lot of people say that we're in this post-truth era, which is like the biggest load of bullshit ever. The truth still exists. There's just a lot more noise covering it up. But there still is like a basic objective reality. Just because the president says something doesn't make it true, which is a lesson that we've all learned in the past 10 years. When somebody says something that just sounds blatantly wrong, or that it could be a talking point from the Heritage Foundation, say something. Speak up. Like, genuinely. Yeah, honestly, I was gonna say, like, my thoughts on this, but I've been giving them the whole video. I don't really have any. I'm just kind of like... you know? The outro really doesn't matter to me because I've already got your watch time, so thank you. You can go now. Given the fact that I have 0 viewers and 0 subscribers, I would be so appreciative if you subscribed that it's literally not even funny. Or even left a comment, or even liked the video. I don't care. Just do something, please. This is really your opportunity to get in on the ground floor, so... Basically, I was raised in, like, the Canadian version of the MAGA movement, because obviously here in Canada, we get all of the spillover of everything that happens in the United States. And after realizing how, like, crazy and illogical it was, I went on this journey from, like, centrist, lib, Joe Biden supporter to, like, I don't want to say leftist, because I am, like, I am technically, like, most aligned with a leftist, but I'm not ideological anymore so much as I just care about, like, data and what like research says, because all of this crazy stuff, like why people support Trump, why people fall for this like crazy media, it's all explainable, and that's what I'm aiming to do with this channel. This is my first video I've ever recorded. I'm so sorry that it's like horrible, but I tried. But basically I overanalyze stuff a lot, and I figured that this would be a really good way for me to like get it out there instead of just doing it alone in my room. And like yeah, bye.